everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 16 of Vinland Saga Season 2. And when we last left off last week, I was catching up on a double feature, and we got Arnheid backstory, we have Gardar backstory. Gardar has killed a bunch of dudes and ran off with Arnheid. Snake is pissed, and Einar and Thorfinn, what are they gonna do? What part will they have to play in all this? Well, we don't exactly know yet, but we know that Thorfinn is very much against perpetuating the system and perpetuating the violence in the system. He wants to change things because he believes that only by changing things are we going to change the status quo. Otherwise, it's just going to keep doing what it's been doing all of these years. And Einar seems on board, even if he doesn't understand Thorfinn's logic entirely, which is rather interesting, right? What's rather curious is I don't really have any comments for this episode, except for Woosh and Sweebian on Discord, on Patreon, was telling me that apparently another reactor, they were watching their reactions to Vinland Saga, and they were at episode 16 of season 1, so exactly one season ago. And in episode 16 of season 1, Ragnar dies, which I was like, man, that feels so weird that we were at that point in season 1. Huh. And was talking about Askeladd killing Ragnar, and Woosh and Sweebian said that, Askeladd killed Ragnar to help Canute come out of his shell, because Askeladd chose Canute to be his king that he would eventually follow. And so Woosh asked the question, do you think that Canute of season 2 was the kind of king Askeladd truly wanted or dreamed of? If Askeladd were still alive, would he still follow Canute in season 2? Or would Canute have been different if Askeladd were still alive? That is a set of loaded questions. And I was like, do you care if I talk about this in the discussion? Because that is a lot, right? That's such a Pandora's box, and it's very much a, how do we know, right? Askeladd being alive now, I guess that would be the question to address first. I don't know what Askeladd would think. I feel like Askeladd would maybe try to sit in the back. And somehow, in some respects, I would think Askeladd would sit in the back and be an observer. But then on the other hand, I'm like, once Wales was kind of locked in as being safe, what would Askeladd's goal have been then? I feel like going back, honestly enough, going back to what Askeladd was telling Thorfinn again at the Stonehenge thing, I honestly think that where Thorfinn is getting to now is kind of, I think, where Askeladd sort of expected Canute to get. So this idea, I feel like Askeladd thought Canute very much felt jaded by the system and the status quo and wanted to change things, which Canute very much does want to change things. However, what's funny about it is that as we are now, Canute is trying to create his utopia like Askeladd believed Canute wanted to back in season 1, but the ways in which Canute are going down that path are still perpetuating the cycles of violence in ways that I'm not sure Askeladd would be totally on board of, because Askeladd was telling Thorfinn about the way that the Romans got along with the people that they invaded, and how they spread things culturally, and they helped them by inventing things and making their culture better, and not being this violent warmongering race, but rather kind of sparking innovation and technology and cultural movements and thought, trains of thought and philosophies and things like that. Like it was a very cultural experience. It wasn't just war and violence and slavery. And Askeladd seemed like that was kind of Askeladd's utopia, is he wanted mindsets to change. Askeladd knew how to play the game, and he knew that in order to blend into a society like the Danes were, that he'd have to kind of, in order to slay the monsters, you have to become the monsters, right? But I think that if you look back at all the things Askeladd did and the things he told Thorfinn, the ways in which he kind of wanted things to get, I think he wanted Canute to be better than Askeladd was. Askeladd's like, here's all the things that I want to do, but I'm not good enough to do them. He's like, I hate myself and where I've kind of devolved at. And he's like, I'm not going to be at the level to get these things accomplished. That's why he looked up to Thor's. That's why when he saw Canute, he's like, oh yes, you can do the things. You can be like Thor's. You can do the things that I cannot. And the ironic thing is that Canute has kind of, without knowing those things that Askeladd told Thorfinn, he's kind of sliding down into the same decisions his father made, the same slippery slopes and mistakes that Askeladd may have made. And so I think, ironically and oddly enough, if Askeladd was a fly on the wall in both Canute and Thorfinn's storylines, I think he'd think Thorfinn is more the king that he originally thought Canute would be, because Thorfinn is thinking, we need to change mindsets. We need to, yes, maybe defend ourselves, but that's not good enough. We have to change the way people think so that we don't have to fight to defend ourselves. We can be more civilized in that, which is kind of what Askeladd wanted. So I think that Thorfinn, even though he's not royalty, I think that Thorfinn might be the true warrior that he wanted Canute to be. But then, I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Thorfinn, I believe, is going to be tempted. Thorfinn has this ideology he's molding. He's creating this ideology. And Einar's kind of challenged it by saying, hey, what happens if these people get attacked? That's all well and good, but what happens if you get attacked? What do we do? And I think Thor has demonstrated you don't have to kill people to make your point. That whole thing, like he could punch someone one time and then they stop. So I don't know. Thorfinn is going to be tested. The question is Thorfinn going to regress and fall back into the pit? Or is he going to cling on and claw his way out again? That's the question. I feel like Canute has dove headfirst into the pit and is like, oh, I'll just dive in the pit, fight the demons, and emerge victorious on top of the pile of corpses as a king. Whereas Thorfinn's like, I hate the pile of corpses and I'm carrying that weight with me. I don't want to add to it. Canute is happy to add to it if it will get him to the top. And he thinks that he can mound the pile of corpses as long as it takes him up the ladder. Thorfinn's like, that's not how we get to the top of the ladder, nor is it how we should or want to get there. So that's a very good question, Whoosh and Sweebian, and one that deserves to be answered. But y'all, I'm really excited to see what we get this episode, but I don't know. Gardar and Arnheid have gone away. Snake is mad. We're in episode 16, and if you think back to season 1, that's around the time Ragnar died, and then things went crazy from there, so we'll just see what happens, won't we? So before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon. We have 3 tiers on Patreon. I have a Discord tier that gets you access to our Discord to talk about these shows, as well as voting on the shows that I watch in the future. I also have a tier where you get not only those 2 things, but you get access to everything a week earlier than everyone else. So if you're on YouTube and you want to watch episode 17, you can join that tier and watch it now. And then I have the philanthropy tier that is basically all of those things, plus a shout out in my videos. And if we have ties in the polls, you all get to be the tiebreakers. So I'm really fortunate that these people help support me in not only buying manga and anime for me to react and to read and talk about on this channel, but also to support streaming services, software, things like that. You all are amazingly gracious, and I'm exceedingly lucky to have your support. I could not thank you all enough. Thank you all so, so much. All of my love to Dana, to Edgar, to Anime Annie, to Truck, to Kenny, to Nameless Monster, to Tyrone, to Arjo, to Shimoyama, to Be Happy, to Translucent Men, to Edgar, and to Sunspots. You all are amazing, and I'm very fortunate. All of my love. So let's not waste any more time, y'all. We're going to dive in and see what happens. So we're going to start Vinland Saga episode 16, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this, y'all. That episode was such a tease. That episode was such a tease. But you know, I will give the show I will give this season a lot of props, because I could see a lot of people being frustrated by this episode, and I was getting frustrated towards the end because I was like, we're going to end it here, aren't we? We're going to end it before Snake and him have the confrontation. That's going to be the end of it. How dare you, show? That was the quickest 25 minutes of my life. It went by so quickly. It felt so fast. I was like, how dare it? And I was like, oh, that whole recap there was just so they could end with Thorfinn doing the same stance with his fists that he does that he would have with the knives, right? Except it's a little bit different, right? Except he doesn't have blades in his hands, right? So that's interesting, like thinking about what Thorfinn is going to do in the next episode to hopefully get them to let Gardar and Arnheid go, right? To let them go, right? What are we going to do about that? So that is the question. But I can see why people will be frustrated with this episode. I can just see the comments now where they're like, nothing happened in this episode. There was no action. And it's like, yeah, I give this series a lot of props because this season is quite different than season 1. Season 1 was a lot of blood and guts and gore, but it kind of matched where Thorfinn's mindset was. Like, Thorfinn was all about revenge and battle, and he was swimming in the pit in the middle of hell, and it was kind of supposed to emulate that. And in this season, it's a much older, more mature Thorfinn thinking through these things and being like, what do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? Do I really want to go back into hell? And what I love, and the reason why Whiteboard Kun is out, is because we talk about Askeladd and who is Canute, what Askeladd would want. And it's, my gut instinct would be to say no, but I feel like we've not gotten Canute on the same level as we've gotten Thorfinn so far. We've gotten just a little bit into Canute's head, but a lot of what we've seen through Canute has been through other people's eyes. The only time we've really seen what Canute's been thinking has been when he's been talking to the disembodied head of his father. So I do want to point out, I think it's rather interesting that you have Thorfinn, here, and then we have Canute, right? And what's odd about all of it is that Canute is talking to, we have the dead head of Swin, and we have the figure of Askeladd. And the odd thing is that each of these two figures that both Canute and Thorfinn have despised in the past Thorfinn despised Askeladd. Despised and hated him, sought revenge after him. Canute hated his father, sought revenge after him. And the irony of all ironies is that these two figures that they both despised and wanted dead for an entire season are not only the ways that they are seeking advice, but they are also representations of how they view themselves, or where they think that they are going. You have Canute, who believes he is following down the footsteps of his father. The ghost of his father telling him, you're following in my footsteps, is not the ghost of his father telling him these things. It's Canute telling himself that, right? He's just imagining it through his father, but it's literally Canute telling himself he's becoming like his dad. That's the whole representation. And then you have Askeladd, who is literally telling Thorfinn, like, hey, are you going to be a pacifist, or are you going to do like what Einar said and defend the people you care about? What's it going to be? And the thing that's interesting is, like, is there a third option? Is there a third option? And I think that that's kind of true with both of them, where you have Thorfinn who's trying to say, how can I, have these pacifist ideals, but have strength as well? Where do I meet there? Whereas you have Canute saying, how do I create this utopia amidst a war culture? You have these two people that are trying to like ponder, is there a third option? Like, so far Thorfinn's like, okay, it's either pacifism or battle. And you have Canute saying it's either war, or it's either a win or a loss and weakness. And he's like, is there a way? Canute's whole thing is like, is there a way to win without bloodshed? That kind of seems to be his motivation. He's like, the whole thing with the poison was, how do I get to the top without killing people necessarily? And if I poison them, I didn't shed any blood, technically. And then Thorfinn's case is like, how do I stop slavery and war without violence in the system? And both of them are they're both trying to upend the system that's been put into place. But the crazy thing in it all is, at this moment, I feel like Thorfinn is trying to think, okay, what can we do? What is this third option? And we've seen him trying to mull it over and figure it out for himself. And Canute, I think, is looking for a third option, but we don't see a lot of that, right? I don't feel like we've had nearly as much Canute content as we've had Thorfinn, right? We need more Canute content. And I think that maybe if we do season 3, by the time we get to season 2, we're going to get that, right? But I don't know. But I find it amazing that Askeladd is this representation to Thorfinn. And because Thorfinn's like, Askeladd was smart. Askeladd was resourceful. Askeladd had people's backs. Like, Askeladd was a figure of prominence and confidence. And it's someone that Thorfinn, despite as a kid hating, understood why people followed him. And then you have Canute, who looks to his father being like he was a man of power and respect. And people, whether they liked him or hated him, he commanded them. So it's like Canute is getting what Canute wants is the respect and power that his father had. Only he wants to be himself through it, even though he doesn't know if that's going to be accomplishable. And Thorfinn, what he wants is the confidence, resolve, and wit that Askeladd had. So I find it interesting that these men who take figures that they hated but understood what was good about them are trying to embody those things that made them strong and made them respectable, made them powerful, but doing it in their own way. So that's kind of what I love. And God, it feels so good to hear Askeladd's voice. I was so sad when we ended season 1. I was like, if that's the last time we ever see Askeladd, I'm going to be so freaking sad. And I could not be happier that he is back in the game, in here, influencing Thorfinn of all people. Like, it's kind of amazing. I'm kind of all about it. So yeah, we spend a good 2 minutes on that recap. They wanted to end that episode exactly where they did for a reason. I am sure of it. And we still have lots in the OP that we've not touched on, but we still have 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. We still have 8 episodes. We have a lot of Vinland Saga left. I feel like we're going to resolve the stuff with Gardar within 2 episodes. I feel like within 2 episodes we'll probably resolve the Gardar thing. However that shakes out. Or we will resolve the Gardar thing enough because Canute will arrive. One of those 2 things, right? But yeah, I like this entire episode was just Einar running. Einar becomes Forrest Gump, and this entire episode is just him running around like a madman, and that's pretty much it, right? That's the whole thing. They're just running to go see Arnheid. I'm like, Badger didn't even remember who they were, but Snake did. Snake remembers lots of things. So let's talk about Snake. I'm going to put Snake, our slippery Snake. We're going to put him over here. That Snake... Here, Snake is observant and he is respectful. Here's the funny thing. Snake is also a liar. He's a liar because he has a slithery tongue. Because he tells him in earlier episodes, he's like, nobody cares about the opinions of slaves, but yet he remembers exactly who they are when the other guys don't. Come on. Like Snake puts on a big old front. And he has his own hidden mysteries. And I hope that Snake sticks around because I really like his character. I want to know more about them. And Snake knows exactly. He's like, no, leave them alone. Let them do what they want. Snake, I'm sure, thinks, okay, these 2 have come here to help Arnheid. So if we let them stick around long enough, they're going to lead us to Gardar. Which, surprise, they do. And Snake seems to figure it out towards the end. So, mysteries about Snake. The sword. The sword that he has. Where is he from? Where is he from? And then, speaking of which, we have the animal name. So, I find it odd in this world where I don't think Snake's his real name. It seems more like a nickname, kind of like Badger and Fox and Lizard and Spider. But it almost seems like what's so kind of ironic about it is that those names, those animal names that are like nicknames, almost seem like something you would call a slave. Like, it'd be like, oh, your name's not Joe, it's Worm, or something like that. It seems almost demeaning. Maybe it's not. Maybe culturally that's just how their group goes, and it's kind of like a badge of honor if you have this moniker. But it just feels like it could be taken in a negative connotation. But yeah, Snake, his sword is from somewhere else. And for once, I'm glad I don't know history or know armories, because I'd be like, oh, what kind of sword is that, right? I'm sure some people watching that are like into swords and like the history of them is like, oh, that's what that is. So I don't want to know. I want to wait and see if the show gives us any clues or tells us, like, maybe he's kind of like, we've been comparing him to Askeladd a lot. Maybe Snake is originally from somewhere else. Maybe Snake was a slave at one time. Maybe Snake knows people that maybe his own people were enslaved, but he got away and was not. And maybe he joined this group of defenders to get away from being a slave. We don't know, right? We don't know. But he clearly is not from around here, and Sverkel has paid attention to that. And he's like, you are not from here either, so you're running from something as well, right? Or he'll get into that conversation later. He says, leave them alone, let them do they want what they want. I love what this series does with hands. It has a big tendency to focus on hands. It focuses on Arnheid's hands and how like chafed and blood and kind of bloody they are and scraped up, not only from her cleaning the dishes, but from her like doing all these chores to her tending to Gardar's wounds. Like her hands are just raw at this point, to like cutting the ropes. Like her hands are just raw completely. And then at one point in the episode, we cut to Sverkel's hands being like all veiny when he's talking about how he can't get up anymore and he's going to die. We cut to Snake grabbing his sword to take it out. We cut to Thorfinn in his hands. There's a big focus on hands. And hands are often a symbolic narrative tool that is used. You could take stories like Oliver Twist, for example, and how they focus on hands as a class system thing. Like if people's hands are dirty or grimy, it's a sign that they're of a lower class or a working class. If their hands are pristine and delicate, it's a sign that they're, have royalty or they're elegant or have this kind of personality. Like they're used symbolically and they represent lots of things in different stories. They can like exchanging something, shaking hands, representing that trust. In Attack on Titan, Jean wipes his hand across Connie's back and says, I'm wiping away my trust in humanity. Like they're used for that. In every series of anime you've watched, there's probably been some reference to hands and what they've been used. I think of Horikoshi, who writes My Hero Academia, or I think of Jujutsu Kaisen's writer Akutami. They love to draw hands and use them in various different ways symbolically. So it's cool that this episode focuses on them, and at the very end we have Thorfinn in the fighting stance with his hands, but they're not holding swords. So, and then Askeladd with the close-up of his hands like gripping Thorfinn's shoulder and Thorfinn like gripping a fist. Like hands are so symbolic in this episode. But what I love about it is that the show very much doesn't shove it down your throat and make it obvious. It doesn't linger too long on the shots. It's there just enough that if you catch it, you can be like, oh, that's cool. And if you didn't catch it, it's not gonna affect your understanding of the scene. So I really like that. I thought that was a really cool thing that this episode does throughout. But yeah, poor Arnheid. Arnheid's voice actress, can we give her props? I feel like the last 3 episodes, she's really carried the story. Like, her voice actress is so damn good. Like, her voice actress is amazing. She's just, the emotion she's conveyed and the crying and carrying on a conversation as theater is hard. I don't know if any of you ever tried to like do any acting or cry during a scene. Trying to be authentic and crying while carrying on a conversation is not easy, nor is it usually understandable. And she manages to make it work. But she's so strong, saying that like she helped him escape, the man watching him. I thought we'd both be killed, Now, we don't understand if it's implied if she just cut the ropes or if she stabbed that man as well. We don't know. Did she stab the man or did she just cut the ropes and he did the rest? We don't know that, right? But what's interesting about all of this is that she talks about Gardar killing the others and getting away. And we get to Thorfinn, and all Thorfinn can think about is that his worry is that there are more dead. He's like, nobody was saved. Eleanor Rigby's playing in the background. No one was saved. and he's not happy about it, right? That seems to be his biggest worry, is to prevent death on all fronts. That seems to be Thorfinn's thing. And the crazy thing is, this third option that we talk about here, I feel like it's connected in large part to his father, and maybe that is what he's going to get by the end of this season. For us, the audience, we've known for a long time that kind of the ideal that Askeladd strove to find in Canute, and the ideal that Leif has found in Thor's, basically, and what Thorkel respected was Thor's, because Thor's embodied this idea of strength alongside pacifism. Now, did Thor's pacifism sometimes overtake the strength? You could argue that. You could think that Thor's was kind of like an imperfect version of what I think Thorfinn is ideally wanting to become. Maybe Thorfinn will become the better version of his father. That'd be amazing. If Thorfinn could figure out how to be like his father, only better, I'm all for it. I think that's what Askeladd would want. And I think the ghost of Askeladd that Thorfinn is like seeking for advice would be all about that too, right? So it's so interesting because Askeladd is like simultaneously Thorfinn's shoulder devil and shoulder angel. He's like both at the same time. He's there. He's like a little shoulder anti-hero where he's just like, can't you figure it out, Thorfinn? But he doesn't want Thorfinn to fail. But at the same time, he's not making it easy. So I appreciate Askeladd's presence and what it represents. But they figure out that they're watching. They're being watched. And they help her to like do the dishes and tell her to stay calm. And she explains that Gardar was injured. And if you look back at the flashback, we see her in the house where Sverkel is tending to his wounds, right? The fact that Sverkel got in on this and was just like, yes, let's do this. And Sverkel's whole thing to Snake is that slaves, they're not losers or inferior. They were just unlucky. The idea that life is not fair or balanced. It's not a matter of winning or losing that makes you a slave. There's so many factors. He's like, you just got unlucky. I like that what Sverkel is suggesting in that conversation of Snake is that there is not anything that's an ultimate victor or an immortal victor, right? He's like, eventually everyone loses. So eventually everyone has the potential to become a slave. It just depends on the luck of the draw. Are you going to be the victor or are you going to be the loser? But it's not a matter of strength or weakness that makes you a slave. It's literally, did you end up being in the best of the situation or not? And so Sverkel's like, I don't mind helping these people because they seem like decent people. They just got the short end of the stick, right? And Snake, we'll go back to Snake. About the whole thing about his men. They seem to think Gardar fled and is hiding somewhere, and there's 2 other men inside. So that's how Thorfinn and them knew there was 3 altogether. She's like, why? And Einar's like, why would you do something so reckless by yourself? And she's like, and Einar's like, didn't you say you were going to weather the storm for the sake of the child inside of you? And Arnheid's like, have you ever been pregnant? Have you ever had hormones, Einar? You know how those work? If she had just gone off on him and been like, do you know how difficult this is being in the early aughts, being pregnant with all these hormones, stuck by a bunch of raging men? It's not fun. And nobody has Oreos to give me, so leave me alone. I want pickles and Oreos, and I'm all out of pickles and Oreos. So for Arnheid, and of course, Einar doesn't understand. So I like that Arnheid is basically suggesting that she wanted both. She wanted to have this child, but also be with Gardar. And you can't blame her. She doesn't really like Kettle. She had just settled with Kettle because that was the safe thing to do. But she never loved him like we suspect she loves Gardar. And she's like, I kind of just had this idea that I'd have this kid. And the thing of it is, she could escape with Gardar, have this kid. Is she going to tell Gardar that it's Kettle's kid? I mean, if it comes out looking like Kettle and doesn't look at all like either of them, then I guess, yeah, sure. But I feel like she would tell him, but I feel like Gardar, if he's anything like he was in the past, he wouldn't care. But also, I don't think Kettle knows that she's pregnant. So Kettle might be okay in the end, not knowing. Or Kettle may die and it won't matter. If Kettle dies by the end of the season and these two manage to get away, then I guess it won't matter. But I don't know. Based on the OP, I feel like the battle is still going to happen with Canute and them getting there and Leif getting there all around the same time, and it's going to be ridiculously chaotic. And I feel, my theory is that Thorgil's going to die. He's going to die. Kettle may die. I feel like Olmar's not going to die. I feel like Olmar's going to live because the mangaka has a part to play with his character. Now, whatever that ends up being, if he ends up following Thorfinn and joining the cause with him, if he tells Thorfinn he's seen battle and seen what killing does and he doesn't want any part in it and joins Thorfinn's cause, then we'll see, right? But I could see that happening, but I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. And so, yeah, Arnie just crying, and I like that Einar is like, what do we do? She's like, I thought perhaps that my husband had returned, the eyes so full of confidence. She's like, I wanted to see my husband again as he was before, but he was a changed man, but I still love him, so I have to help him. You know, she's like, what else can I do? She's like, we've lived so miserably since we lost our son, and I still dreamed of being able to have this freedom. And Thorfinn's just sitting there like, oh, well, damn it. You know, Thorfinn's just like, this sucks. And Einar is like, has the most empathetic face possible in this situation. And that's when they both are like, well, we'll help you then. And she's like, he was bleeding on the right side of his chest. So it's on this side. Okay. Ugh. And Einar's like, well, are you prepared for the difficult road? Because you are pregnant. And she's like, no shit, Sherlock. And he's like, this is going to be difficult, but do you want to go with him? And Einar, bro of all bros, I freaking love Einar. And I said this in the last reaction, but what I love so much about Einar's character in this is that they could have very well wrote him to be like the jealous character that's jealous of her and Gardar. And they could have made a whole melodramatic bullshit storyline about him like wanting Gardar to die so he could be with Arnheid. But that's not Einar's character, right? Einar is a bro among bros. And he's like, girl, if you want to go off with your husband, I'm going to help you because I'm that guy. Like, he clearly likes Arnheid. But he's nice and a good man. And is like, I'm going to help you get out with your husband. And Thorfinn's like, bro. like, this is the best thing, bro. Like, what a great guy you are. And offers to help as well, right? It's just beautiful. He's like, if you want to live with Gardar, you'll have to flee together. The road's going to be difficult, but I'll help you. And Thorfinn's like, like a bro after my own heart. And he's like, then I'll help too. But he also says, is this the only option? Is this really the only option is running away? I guess that's a thing too, is Thorfinn's wondering, like, is running or fighting the only options? Like, what else can we do? I feel like Thorfinn's trying to tackle like this systemic problem that's been plaguing the Danes for like centuries and being like, how do we change things? And I'm like, if you told me Thorfinn was going to become a revolutionary last season, wouldn't have believed you, but there's been lots of surprises with his character this season. I just love Einar's face of like, bro, man. And Arnheid's like, you guys are amazing. Right? Ugh. And so Snake, I love that Snake throughout this entire thing that has told Badger and Spider to keep watch, he has stayed close to Sverkel throughout it all. He has stayed close to Sverkel. That he clearly cares about this old man, right? He clearly cares about him and wants to stay with him to make sure he's safe. And so then we have... And I like that Badger took his eyes off of Arnheid long enough for her to come in to prepare lunch, and Snake had threatened to like break his nose. And he's like, take the tools and cook out in the yard where you can be seen. And so she's working on that. And meanwhile, Sverkel says, what a pitiful bunch. And what's interesting is that Snake has never seemed like condescending towards any of the slaves in the story. He seems almost understanding or sympathetic, but he puts on a persona in front of his men because he has to, right? That's like part of it. He has to come across a certain way to command authority. Very much like Askeladd, right? And I almost feel like Sverkel's mindset and Snake's cunning are kind of like their attributes of Askeladd kind of separated here, which is rather interesting. Because Askeladd hated slavery. He hated it because he saw his mother in it, right? And so Snake is just like, what are you talking about? And he says, everyone thinks that inferior people become slaves. And that's not true. It's just that they're unlucky. Like, Askeladd wasn't necessarily inferior. It's just, his mom just got lucked into that position or unlucked into that position. They were just unlucky. He's like, any one of us under a given circumstance could become slaves. And he tries to tell Snake that. He's like, if you and I had been lucky, we might have ended up the exact same way too. But we didn't. So it's this idea that slavery, the unlucky business, it's the fact that everyone is a human. Because the whole point of the slavery thing is everyone has treated Thorfinn and Einar as like they're second-class citizens, as if they're subhuman. They're not on the same level as them. But Sverkel's saying, no, that's not the case. They're human no different than you or I. We could have ended up just as easily in the same boat. We were just privileged and fortunate enough for that to not happen. So who are we to treat any of these people different just because they're slaves? Like, what gives us the right? And Snake tries to say, well, so what? So what about unluckiness? This has nothing to do with it. He killed 5 of my men. And to Snake's credit, yeah, Gardar did kill 5 of his men, which he should not have done, but given the circumstance, he chose violence, right? He says, I won't be satisfied until he's dead. Snake is kind of suggesting in this moment that, and granted, Badger and Spider are around listening, so they can hear all this, but Snake basically says that because he killed 5 of my men, he crossed a line. He crossed a line and has to be punished for it, and the punishment is death. He's like, I can't let him go. I won't be satisfied until then. I can't walk around wearing this sword while I'm crying myself to sleep over my unavenged men. And so there's part of me that's like, wow, he really cares about these men, because at the beginning of the episode, at the beginning of the season, when we first meet him, he kind of has no qualms about like putting him in this place and calling them Bakas. But I guess maybe he does really care about them. I'm not sure how genuine we're supposed to treat that line. But if he does care about them, then yeah. He's like, otherwise, he's like, what good? Why do I have a sword if it's not to defend and get revenge on what was lost? And Sverkel says, well, if that's the case, abandon the sword. Drop it. He's like, forget it then. He's like, if that's the case, if that's the situation, then just let go of the sword. I love when he says, then throw away your sword. And Snake just like, that eye opening, he's like, what? And he looks at him right back. He's like, even I can tell that sword isn't from around here. Where'd you get it from? Who'd you take it from? There was a reason you ended up here. Like, there's fate that has brought you here. Something. I doubt throwing away your sword would allow you to escape whatever it was. So he's like, you're chasing something just like anyone else, or you're running from something. And that sword, probably something you took from somewhere or from someone, but you're not just going to discard it, right? He's like, I doubt throwing away your sword is going to let you escape whatever it is you're running from. So the sword's just there to try to give you peace of mind. And I like this thing. It's like, you don't know me. He's like, it's time for your nap. I don't want to talk about myself. I want to know all about Snake. I want to know all about him. I want to know everything. And Sverkel telling him, he's like, you can have my farm. He's like, take my farm. I like that, which granted, it's not Kettle's. This is the one thing that is Sverkel's, is his farm. Kettle owns everything else, but Sverkel has his own little farm. And he's like, you can take my farm. And he says, produce life. Quit killing things. I wish Thorfinn could have heard this whole conversation. We talk about characters that needed to hear conversations. I wish Thorfinn could have heard this. That would have been amazing. Because I think he's basically, Sverkel is connecting to Thorfinn, being like, Thorfinn in the last episode said he wanted to end up doing more good than bad and leaving things better than when, he originally found them. And Sverkel's like, Snake, you could do that. Let go of your sword. Let go of this hatred. Let go of all of that. It's not going to do you any good. You won't feel better. And just do something that's productive instead. Produce life. Till the soil. Do something that's going to benefit others, right? Killing people is not going to do that. It's better than swinging around a sword. And Snake's face is like genuinely like, are you freaking serious? Like he seems like for a second kind of bewildered by this idea, right? Because he says, I can no longer stand and walk. I'm going to die soon. You could take my farm. I'd give it to you. Oh, Snake. It's a good opportunity for straighten out your life. Like, let go of this violence and do something instead. I owe you for reading the Bible to me. Like, we sat here and read all these stories, Snake, that kind of hint at this. So maybe, practice what you've been preaching to me. I'm giving you the chance. And I like that Snake has that little eye like, you being serious, old man? Like, no. He's like, don't talk about that nonsense now. I like that he just gets so tsundere. He's like, I'm not doing stinking field work. I want him to so badly. I kind of want him to. I want him to take over the farm. But Canute's on his way, so I doubt that's going to happen. The only thing is I don't know if Sverkel's going to make it to see Canute and them get back, or if Kettle's going to see his dad before he dies. I don't know. Everybody says I'm not doing any field work. And then that's when the boss gets there, and that's when Einar shows up. Man, Einar gets the award for, track meet of the century. Einar gets the track meet award, because all he did this episode was run. Einar's just, hoofing it the entire time. I'm like, dude. And the dragonflies. I feel like dragonflies, are they a symbol? What are dragonflies a symbol of? I want to look this up, because I felt like it was interesting that we had dragonflies as an example. Dragonfly symbolism. I know that we have fire. I was thinking of Grave of the Fireflies. So in almost every part of the world, dragonflies symbolize change, transformation, adaptability, and self-realization. It often has its source in mental and emotional maturity and understanding of the deeper meaning of life. Well, the episode's called Great Purpose. Isn't that funny that we have a bunch of dragonflies and one perches on top of Thorfinn's head, like he's having this moment of self-realization. He also looked like a lion crouching through the Serengeti in the weeds, about to go attack his prey, right? He's like Simba. We had Thor's was Mufasa, and now Thorfinn is Simba. And Sverkel is Rafiki. And does that mean Canute is Scar? I don't know. But there was one moment of kind of humor in this when Einar is running endlessly towards the woods. He's not getting there. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Monty Python, the Holy Grail, where there's the drum beat, and it's when Lancelot looks over and Lancelot's running towards the castle, and Monty Python's and he just keeps getting slowly closer and closer, but it doesn't seem like he's moving. That was Einar in the running scene. He was basically Lancelot and Monty Python. It was great. And so Thorfinn says, I'm sorry, sir, but I need to borrow your horse and cart. I'll work to pay you back. And Sverkel's like, you don't know me. I'm in on this. He's like, let the old grandpa have some fun. He's like, I'm going to help get you kiddos out of here. If I'm there, we can travel around the farm in question. He's like, let me go with you all. And Thorfinn's like, well, I don't want to get you involved. And he's like, bitch, I'm already involved. Now quit arguing and help me up. And so Snake is super smart, because as Thorfinn and them, they uncover him from underneath the house. I can't believe he's under the bed the whole time. Snake was literally right beside him the entire time. And a part of me wonders if Snake knew he was there. A part of me wonders if he knew, but because he claimed he couldn't sense him. I don't know. But yeah, his wounds were tended to, but he's lost too much blood. He's cold. And so they decide to move. And at that point, Snake puts two and together. He's like, technically, he shouldn't be able to run this fast if he's as injured as he was. So this is probably, he figures out that it's not Gardar. Gardar's back at the house, but he doesn't want to tell those guys there and throw them off. Now, I'm pretty confident that Einar can get away from Spider and Badger. I don't really trust the competence of Spider and Badger. Not too much. Maybe I could be proven wrong, but I feel like Einar is going to be okay. What I think would be crazy to happen is if Thorfinn and all the stuff gets resolved next episode with them, and then Einar is like running away from Badger and Spider and runs into Canute's army landing on shore, that would be terrifying. That would be bad. Don't know what we'll do about that, but we'll see. And Thorfinn just lifting up Gardar. Gardar's a big-ass man, right? He's huge. And Thorfinn just lifts him up like he's a Barbie doll. And Sverkel's like, let's go for it. And so, yeah, puts him in there, and then Snake manages to meet them at the cart. Yeah, he dismounted and ran there. Okay. And Snake's like, I couldn't sense him because he was unconscious. Oh. And the whole thing is that Arnheid's like, what is Thorfinn going to do? And that's the moment. God, I love Askeladd coming into this. Where he's like, Thorfinn, I'm not here to negotiate. If you don't get out of my way, I'll kill you. And that's when Askeladd shows up, because Thorfinn's like, what do I do? Do I fight him? How do I go about this? Like, there were 3 pursuers, so he's by himself. He's like, if I just take a blow to his chin, I could slip past the sword and deal a blow to his chin, just knock him out. Wouldn't that work, right? I love Askeladd. Thorfinn is still like 5'1", 5'2", and Askeladd's just like, hey, little guy, like just... It's funny because Thorfinn didn't get taller, but Askeladd's just over here like, hey, good grief. I love he says good grief so much. I guess you can't help it this time. Like, just looks like a Pops figure. You're helping someone. You've got a good reason to raise your fists. But that's going to go against what you told Einar, right? I love that Askeladd's just chummy with him. He's like, but you know, I'm sure he's got a good reason too. I like that there's that part, because Thorfinn's trying to realize, he's like, I have someone I'm trying to protect, but also he has reason to want to attack him. So what do we do about that? What do we do about his reasoning? What will you do, Thorfinn? Will you remain a pacifist, or will you fight him in order to help someone else? Because that's what the status quo has been, right? That we're fighting to help someone else. And again, the focus on the hands. Which road leads to becoming a true warrior? Why can't there be a third option? Can there be a middle road, right? Does it have to be one way or the other? There's no time to think about it. So he's right in front of you. And I like that Thorfinn's like, I hate that pained expression where Thorfinn's like, what do I do? What do I do in this situation? And Snake doesn't look like he wants to fight Thorfinn. Snake is like not happy that he has to do this. And Snake's been conflicted this entire time because Snake has understood why Arnheid would want to help her husband, why Gardar would want to see Arnheid. He understands the situation. He doesn't seem like he's been happy about it, but he's like, I'm in charge of these men. I have a duty. I'm supposed to protect you for Kettle. Why are you making this difficult for me? And so it's not like he wants to fight. He doesn't necessarily want to keep Gardar enslaved. He didn't try to kill Gardar, right? He could have killed him all these times, but he's kept him alive. And so it's like Snake just doesn't want to do this. And Thorfinn's like, okay. And he goes after and lunges after him with the hand like he's going to punch his chin. And then Snake defends himself. And Thorfinn's like, well, damn it, what do I do now? And it's just like Snake knew what he was trying to do. And the look that Snake gives him is very pitiful. And I just love that Sverkel's like, just peeks out of the door. It's great. I want Sverkel to say something in the next episode to maybe stop Snake, but I don't know if that's going to happen. And oh, that look on Thorfinn's face is so like just, I'm going to have to defend myself, but what do we do, right? And Askeladd says, do you think you can still beat him while you're still half asleep? And this goes back to what Snake told him back early on in the season when he was just standing there. He's like, you're half asleep. Wake up. And it's like the whole episode was titled Awakening, right? I think it was episode 4 maybe, where it was called Awakening. And it was about him waking up and snapping out of it. So Askeladd's trying to get him to do that again. But what do we do with that? What does Thorfinn end up doing? And he makes the stance and raises his fist. And like, it's like he's analyzing him and him thinking like, that's an odd stance. It's not for a sword or an axe. No, what is it? And what's so cool about it, it's Thorfinn with the stance like he's holding the knives, but he doesn't have any weapons this time, right? He's just fighting with his fists. So I'm like, is that the middle road? Is that, are you a true warrior if you don't need a sword and you can just fight with your fists? Is that it? Is that what we do? I want them to explain to us in the next episode where Thorfinn's thought process is, what he's thinking in this moment, because he closes his eyes like he's contemplating something, but we don't know exactly what he's thinking. So I need the next episode to pick up where this one is leaving off to give us that answer. Because I feel like that's going to be Thorfinn's big journey in all this, is figuring the middle road, is figuring that third option. I feel like that's going to be Thorfinn's journey, is trying to find out how he can do these things. And he's probably going to make mistakes along the way, right? I love Thorfinn's ideals and what he wants to do, but he's going to make mistakes along the way. And I just want him to keep growing. I just don't want Thorfinn to regress. That's all I ask the show to do. Don't let Thorfinn go back to the way he was. Let him keep moving forward. Canute's the one that's regressing and getting crazy. I want Thorfinn to become like the stoic character and Canute to be the feral one by the end. I want the spectrums to go opposite. We started with feral child Thorfinn and respectable prince Canute, and they're slowly like paralleling and like weaving and crossing each other, where Thorfinn becomes the stoic, respectable, princely character, and Canute gets feral. I want that combo. But and him holding his hands like that, and again, then we get the close up and see like, what are you gonna do, Thorfinn? What are you gonna do? So, I can't believe how fast this episode went. It went by way too fast, right? Way too fast. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I cannot wait for next week. This episode was too short, and this show is a big old tease. But I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. I want more Ask Glad next week. I want to find out what Snake and Thorfinn do, and I want answers. So we'll find out next week on season 2 of Vinland Saga. Bye.